cancer, clearly the bad guy. And this is the good guy. You're about to discover why this quietly spoken man could become a hero to every woman on this planet. Cancer claims the lives of 7 million people around the world every year. For women, among the most common cancers are breast and cervical cancer. And even though screening programs have dramatically reduced cervical cancer rates, 250,000 women still die from it every year. That's where Professor Ian Fraser comes in. He and his team have developed the world's first cancer vaccine. What's more, he reckons one day it will totally eradicate the disease.
I was living in a long-term, stable, happy, loving relationship, and I had planned on having more children. So for me, I was devastated, the fact that that choice had been taken from me.
Jane Mills is a cervical cancer survivor. In her early 30s and a mum to 2 kids, she was diagnosed with this potentially terminal disease.
I was shocked and devastated. All I wanted to know initially was I going to survive? And it wasn't until sometime later, really, that the full kind of emotional and psychological impact of the diagnosis hit.
Jane's cervical cancer, which resulted in a radical hysterectomy, was caused by a very common virus called HPV, the human papillomavirus. Almost all of us will develop a wart or a strain of the papillomavirus at some stage in our lifetime, and for the most part it's no big deal. However, there are a few high-risk strains that can be passed on during sexual contact that we know can trigger cervical cancer.
I was very ignorant of what HPV virus was. I certainly had no symptoms.
It's the only cancer where 100% of cases are caused by a virus.
In their lifetimes, about 30% of women will be infected with one of the high-risk viruses, but most of them will get rid of it themselves. Only 2% will have a persistent infection. It's only persisting infection that gives a risk of cancer.
Ever since the link with HPV was discovered in the 1980s, Ian Fraser and his team, including close colleague Dr. Zhan Zhu, who died before their work was publicly recognised, have been working on a vaccine.
Most vaccines are made by growing viruses in the lab, and that trick wouldn't work for this one. So we had to come up with a new way of doing it.
The trick they found was to make another virus think it was HPV.
So this great big thing here is actually another virus. It's vaccinia virus, the smallpox vaccine. And that was actually the virus that we tricked into making these virus-like particles.
If Jane had been fortunate enough to get the vaccine, it would have fooled her body into believing it was under attack from a virus. The HPV vaccine is just the protein that makes up the outer skin, without the infectious DNA inside. The body reacts to the presence of the fake virus by making antibodies, which can then fight off any real infection in the future.
Well, as somebody who's been through cervical cancer, I think it's fantastic. I would encourage every young girl and young woman who has not been exposed to the HPV virus to be vaccinated.
The vaccine, which should give lifelong protection to women who haven't yet been exposed to the virus, will contain 4 types of HPV, making it effective against 7 out of 10 cervical cancers. Early clinical trials have also begun for a second vaccine for women who've been exposed to HPV. There's still one barrier to use of the vaccine, and it's not a scientific problem.
I understand in some parts of the world there's been a certain amount of controversy about the vaccine, in that should we be vaccinating our daughters?
Well, I can't see any reason not to. Clearly, the controversy relates to the fact that this is a vaccine against a sexually transmitted infection. But if I were told that this infection killed 250,000 women worldwide every year and there was a vaccine to prevent it, I wouldn't be worried about how it was spread. I'd be wanting the vaccine.
And fellas, you're next in Ian Fraser's sights.
The vaccine at the moment is targeted at women. But obviously, we hope that it'll work in men as well, and if it does work in men, then you would want to vaccinate both men and women equally, because if you did that, you could eventually wipe this virus out.
The final phase of the trials has just been completed with stunning results. The vaccine has proved to be 100% effective, allowing future generations of women to enjoy longer and healthier lives.
Television pictures in thin air, science fiction just became science fact. And we're going to show you how.